everyone, I am going to do a review today and I'm pretty excited about this one, so let's check it out. Today I'm going to be talking about none other than The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. This is book number 4 of the Wayfarer series, and it is one of my favorites aside from book number 1. I feel like you can never kind of recreate the magic of discovering a new series, but this certainly came close. You can read these books separately. I recommend reading them in order just because there are some characters that relate to characters from the first book. In this one, we follow the girlfriend of Ashby from book 1, along with some other characters and species that we have never seen before. So the premise of this book is that there is a planet called Gora that does not really have much going for it. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it happens to be right in the middle of several other systems, so it has become kind of a layover planet where you dock for a few hours and then get in line to go to the next spot. So there's a little bit of traffic, so people are usually only on this planet for a few hours and then they are on their way. So 3 characters find themselves on Gora and they are staying with Olu, and Olu has a house that people can rent a room in. However, at the very beginning of the book, there is a disaster and they find themselves stuck on Gora for days instead of hours. Let's do a deep dive with our rating system. I'm going to start with character, and the first category I have is for personality. There are 5 main characters in this book and a few others that you meet kind of through their stories. You have Pei, who is an alien. They are a species that has no natural way of speaking, although they have mods that they can use. Instead, they have colors swirling on their cheeks, and they grow up learning how to read those colors. There is Revig, who is kind of a beetle species, and he's actually in exile from his home planet. And I won't give away why, but he's got a lot going on. There is Speaker. Speaker is a twin with Tracker. However, when this catastrophe happens, Tracker has stayed on the ship up in orbit, and Speaker is the one who went down to get supplies because they both come from a species who is almost entirely wiped out in a war, and their home planet was destroyed. So now they live entirely on spaceships, and there is a lot of prejudice against their species because they're kind of seen as scavengers who are willing to steal whatever they need. And so people often feel uncomfortable around them. So usually Speaker is the one that goes down into planets as quickly as possible. And they are all staying at Olu's house. Olu has a son named Chupo. And Olu and Chupo are a species that have long legs and a long neck. And Olu is very kind and accommodating. She's worked really hard to make her little vacation home one that caters to every species. So it has a ton of signs, it has food for a variety of species, it has color dampener glasses. So she just seems like a beautiful, like motherly type of character who just wants to really make a home for whoever stays there, even if they're only staying there for a few hours. I am going to give personality a 4 out of 5. I feel like the nature of this scenario where all of a sudden disaster strikes and you are stuck together, you get to see a lot of the characters in a tough situation, how they respond to adversity and challenges, how they respond to being stuck with strangers, and the prejudice that comes with some of their species they have towards each other, and all of a sudden having to stay together, work together. But this was a quick moving book, and so while you got to see them handle a lot of hard things, you didn't get to see as much of them just kind of chilling. And so I feel like I only know the extreme of some of the characters. Not a bad thing at all, but it kept me from giving it 5 out of 5 stars. Relationships, however, 5 out of 5 for sure. Again, by the nature of the plot, they are forced to work together, and the combinations and variations between, Olu and Rovig and Speaker. Speaker and Pei have a hard time getting together. There's a lot of animosity there right off the bat because Pei works with the military and Speakers doesn't like how, the war was handled for her species. The way they navigate around each other in the beginning, kind of giving each other space, being cordial, and then as things start to get a little bit tougher, tempers flare. Becky Chambers always does a great job of making you really feel what the characters feel and asking some very big questions. And I think this is one of those as well, where you just really see so many different combinations of different people coming together that it feels really wonderful. The next category is character growth. I struggled with this one a little bit. So in the beginning, each of the 3 characters that are visiting Gora are setting off on their own journey, and Gora is kind of that middle stopping point. Especially Rovig. Rovig is on a tight timeline to get to this meeting that he has set himself some extra time. He's nervous about. All of them already have a destination in mind. Pei has something come up that might distract her or stop her from getting to see Ashby, which is where she's going. She's on leave. And so she's kind of struggling with, do I go see Ashby or do I go deal with this? And Speaker is on the way to meet up with her colony. They're all meeting up kind of in one day. Usually they're traveling all over, kind of separate from each other, but they have one day where they come together as a species because there's not that many of them left. And so they're all headed on their separate way. So character growth in my mind was how they came into Gora with that journey already set, but they left Gora with different confidence or making a decision for Pei. She has to choose between Ashby or this other thing that has come up. And watching her get to make that decision feels like character growth. Also just how they view each other as a species by the end of it. How they get along with each other by the end of it is very different from the beginning in some cases. But 4 out of 5, I would say. Then you have side characters. Olu feels a little bit like a side character in this because you mainly focus on the 3 visitors, and Olu pops up to bring tea or have a quick conversation. Even Tupo, her son, I think is more of a character. I wish I had got more about Olu because she has a section in the ending, it kind of wraps up each character, and there's a section for her, and I almost felt like I was surprised by how her section ended. She felt very warm. She felt like she was trying so hard to be a good host. And that's kind of it. It was pretty one note. You also meet Tracker, who is Speaker's twin, but again, she stays up in orbit. So there aren't very many side characters in this, and I feel like Olu should not have been a side character, but felt like a side character. I'm giving this 3 out of 5. Most of what I felt for the side characters was in relation to one of the 3 main characters and how they were either worrying about them or excited to see them, or talking about them and part of their backstory, their history, those kinds of things. So I am going to give them 3 out of 5 for that. So overall, we have a 16 out of 20 for characters. I feel like characters is a strong point for Becky Chambers, and this feels a little bit low for what I thought it was going to be, to be honest. Let's look at plot. There are 4 categories. Again, the first one is timeline. The timeline of this, I gave 5 out of 5. It moved really quick. The scenario started right from the jump. You got a good synopsis of each character, then you went right into the problem, and I feel like even though it was mostly focused on how the characters are handling that problem, little things kept coming up that moved the story along. It felt like a quick read, but it didn't feel like I was missing anything, if that makes sense. Action, I am giving 5 out of 5, which is surprising because I feel like this was not an action-oriented book. When I think of action, usually I think of fights and things like that, and this didn't have that. But the little events felt significant in this book, and I think that is deserving of a 5 out of 5. There was 1 or 2 I would consider major challenges, and the way they affected the plot of the book felt very natural. The way the story moved between those challenges and between the characters' personal challenges felt very natural. It all made sense as it moved along, and like I said, the minor events felt major, which I think with a book that doesn't have necessarily a ton of action in it that's what you want. So 5 out of 5. Next up is conflict. There was definitely conflict, like I mentioned, especially between Pei and Speaker. We're almost on like the opposite side of a political spectrum, I would say, is what it felt like. And I really enjoyed the way that they kind of told you each character's stance before they moved into them butting heads and kind of getting into the culmination of those feelings. You also got some background on kind of how it affected the general population, but I didn't feel like I had enough information to make my own decision, I would say, which, you know, each side had its merits, and that kind of is how you left feeling. You could understand, and I think that's a good way to leave things, but I think I wanted a little bit more about the background of their argument so that I felt like I could have a voice in the argument if I was a character in the book, which is kind of how you want to feel. I wanted to be a character in this book, and I wanted to know where I would stand if I was in this argument. That being said, it felt very well done. It felt very, again, natural, like what you would hear in a political argument in today's world, and without being like over the top. So 4 out of 5. Satisfaction in the ending, 5 out of 5. Becky Chambers, man, is just wonderful. This book and all the books I've read of hers are what I would call masterpieces and must-reads. I think I have yet to be unsatisfied with any of her work, and maybe that makes it hold a little bit less weight, but this had a good ending. Each character had a wrap-up. Some of the characters connected in the wrap-up in ways that were so like heartwarming and special. Speaker's ending was great. Rovig sent her a gift that like made me so happy for her, and Rovig makes a very brave choice. It's just good. It has bravery, it has tough decisions. Thumbs up, yes, 100%. 5 out of 5. So the plot gets a 19 out of 20, which is amazing. Okay, world building. This one I always struggle with a lot because I feel like some of the concepts that I've chose to rate are a little bit like open-ended. I usually do lore, but I'm going to take that out because there is no lore to this. It is, a scientific world, not a fantasy world. So I'm going to stick with 3 categories: society, culture, and character backstories. I'm going to start with character backstories and give it a 4 out of 5. You get a good look at Speaker's backstory and Rovig's backstory. Olu, not quite as much, but again, her and Tupo are shoved a little bit to the side in that regard, and I wanted a little bit more on Pei's backstory and her military backstory and her military background. Hers is more like, what does the future look like than where have I been? I think Speaker and Rovig really, their backstories feel very, very strong and well developed, and you do get some on Pei and even some on Olu. So I am giving it 4 out of 5. I still could have done with a little bit more, but the stuff you get feels very well developed. Society, definitely giving society and culture 5 out of 5. That is the basis of this book, is what are society's rules for these 4 species and how they're coming together. And you're watching them as they learn about each other's cultures. You get to see different food from their cultures. You get to see how Rovig, who is kind of beetle-like, uses all of his legs to manipulate. You get to see how Speaker, who is like this big, walks around in a suit to get around, but in her ship she moves very differently and it's built for her. You get to see how Pei, who their whole society and culture is based on color, which can make the color of everyday world very distracting. You get to see how she navigates that and how the others, Olu, tries to dampen the color and use a lot of grays, even buys a special gray for the walls. It's just, I was so impressed with this bit because it was such a focus of this book, and it was, again, I keep saying so well done, but it was so well done. Learning about these species, by the end of the book, they felt very real. Like, I would know what to do if I found myself on one of their worlds, because I learned through that character's eyes and through someone who was trying to navigate setting up a home for those characters and helping those characters eat and live for a few days. I'm giving it a bonus point. That's how wonderful and amazing that piece of this book is. That is why you read this book. Okay, if you want just a beautiful cultural experience for characters that don't even actually exist, that's it. That's this book. So 14 out of 15, but I'm giving it a bonus point, so it gets 15 out of 15. We end up with a total of 49 out of 55 possible points, which is a 5-star, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and call it like I see it. It is on my top shelf for 2022. If you like fantasy or sci-fi, you should read this book. The whole series, really. I have done another review on the first book. It also has a beautiful cover, so it'll look great on your shelf, all right? That's it for me. I will see everybody later. I hope you have a great day. Bye, friends.